Right, enjoy the evening, guys, and with that, I'm handing straight over to Lynn to do the presentation. Thank you very much. Please give me your attention.
Morning. Don't bite. Have a chair. Right, gentlemen, very good evening to you. It's all right, mate. Stephen, going. Right, going to give it to you guys. As you all, hopefully, most of you all should all be aware, hopefully, that Ofcom have very recently launched a consultation paper. It's very comprehensive, and essentially speaking, they're reviewing quite a large number of areas, covering all aspects of our licensing terms and conditions, our operating procedures, etc. Now, we did have a bit of a brief discussion, well, quite a long discussion last week or so, which stimulated some really good comments and all the rest of it. On the basis of that, I then downloaded the document, all 101 pages of it, sat and read it. It's actually quite interesting, and a lot of the proposals I think that they put in there make an awful lot of sense and actually bring amateur radio into the 21st century. They've got rid of some anachronisms, they've got rid of some just oddball stuff, and they're getting rid of a lot of stuff that's just purely complicated and totally unnecessary. What I've done is I've addressed the consultation paper questions itself. They're the things that you guys are going to be interested in. In the document, there are also quite a few explanations of why they're doing things, how they're going to do it, and the legal status, etc. behind it all. Which, all right, if you're interested in that stuff, great read. But it's not necessarily, you know, informative to the actual consultation itself. It doesn't seem to. Right, so what we're going to look at this evening, there's your welcome, you've just had it. Fire door there, toilet round the corner. In the event of the aircraft crashing, find your own way out. Okay, and a welcome. What we'll look at is a summary of the consultation exercise, the questions that they're asking you to respond to, and I'll make some closing points. If you've got questions, guys, just you do the usual, please, just stick a finger in the air. But preferably, I'd like, if you can, keep your questions until the end, because there are 20-odd slides, and I don't want to kill anybody with death by PowerPoint. So I'm not going to say I'm necessarily going to rattle through them, but I'm not really going to be hanging around either, so to speak. Okay, so what are they doing it for? Well, they're going to update the overall licensing framework and streamline and modernise the call sign assignments and adjust technical parameters to reflect the evolving needs of the hobby and provide amateur with a greater operating freedom, and to provide clear updates for rules, terms and conditions that are easy for everybody to understand. Now, we can all admit at some point we've looked at one of the T&Cs and gone, really? And Ofcom are also claiming that it's an excessive administrative burden on them that people ring up and ask that questions when they think it's all there in black and white, you should know it. Well, actually, they've looked at it and gone, yeah, maybe not. And we will address that situation. So what they're looking at really, they're going to review the licensing framework proposals, they're going to propose changes to call signs, they're going to technical parameters review, and licensing terms and conditions. They're the four areas that are contained in this actual consultation. This is basically a colour-coded map, if you like, of what they're actually proposing to do. There are two columns on the side. On the left side here, they're proposing to modernise the policies and the rules for greater operating freedom. And on the left-hand side, this is basically to clarify and streamline the rules and terms and conditions. Now, I've got copies here. I'll pass one on that side, and if anybody wants to actually have a look at it, it's just basically what I'm going to be talking about for the next 20 minutes or so. Right, so, what are they asking you? Well, they're asking you a whole load of questions. There are 17 of them. Okay, question 1 says, do you agree with our proposals that each licensee should only be able to have one personal licence? And what I've done here is I've extracted all what I believe are the main points of their argument, so to speak, in the next 2.5 pages that follows on, or actually the questions fall at the end of the pages. But, so what they've actually, that's their justifications. Okay, things like keep the licensing database up to date and relevant. Currently there are 101,000 plus licences on issue in the United Kingdom at this point in time. But they know for a fact there are only between 60 and 70,000 amateur radio operators. So there's about a 30% duplication of information, possibly, going around. So what they're actually saying with this is that if you progress from foundation to intermediate to full licence, but you're still holding an M3 or an M6 or a 2E0 as well, they want you to relinquish it. All right? And it just makes sense, guys. I mean, if you've got a full licence, what do you want to operate at 10 watts? All right? It maintains the station unique identity. All right? Club licences will be excluded from this change, but there are changes coming to club licences later on in the proposals. Usual one, Ofcom are obviously seeking to reduce their financial expenditure. And as we've seen throughout the whole of society in the UK, if they could get it online and they don't have to employ somebody and you've got to sit there and answer questions on a keyboard, then that's exactly what they'll do. They'll replace it with an online system as opposed to a human being. And we all know how well that works, don't we? All right. Ofcom haven't identified a spectrum management need, and that phrase reoccurs quite a lot within this whole proposal system for concurrent licences. Right? Spectrum management need. They've looked at what's there and they've gone, no justification for maintaining this concept, this idea, whatever, and we'll get rid of it, which is quite a good idea. In the future, requests for additional licences at the same or lower level will be refused. That's not covering club licences, and it's not covering contest licences either. But if you find yourself in need of two full licence call signs, generally speaking, they won't let you have it. Right? And holders of more than one licence at the same level will be required to choose one and surrender the others. I believe Colin mentioned that he had 2 full licence call signs, a G5 and one of the other one was. You will be required to surrender one, choose one, and the other one's got to go. End of. And they're not debating that one. Right. And then at the bottom of every single question is the same thing. Do you have any comments or proposals? Question 2. Right, they're talking about proposals for greater supervised use of radio equipment by other people. To cut a long story short, they're trying to encourage non-licensed operators to come into the hobby. And they figure the best way to do that is to blanket say anybody with a licence can supervise somebody who isn't licensed. And that's right down the hill to foundation operators. Personally, I have an issue with that. Okay, but that's my personal opinion. Please, guys, when I state my personal opinion, I will tell you. Because you've obviously got to make your own mind up and decide what you think. Okay. Ofcom believes the current rules on our terms and conditions are too complex. There are some bits in it that I think are a bit complex. The current licence conditions differentiate between sending a message and operating equipment, which is not relevant to the use of the spectrum. They do actually specify, if you read the current terms and conditions, that very point. Right? They're getting rid of that idea, that whole concept. Those 2 whole concepts are going. So when I and the training team did things like JOTA, technically we were in a very grey area allowing the scouts to operate the radio equipment. Under the terms of our conditions of a licence, it should have been either me or Kerry or Shay sitting there physically holding the microphone and controlling that radio, which gives that scout absolutely no experience whatsoever of using that equipment. And the fact that we did actually sit there with a foot key ready to cut them off was neither really there, but they were the ones using that radio gear, and that was the important thing. And all they've done now is they've clarified that and said, yeah, no problem at all. In theory, Mike could go home, take Em into the Radio Shack and say, "Oh, sweetheart, using my call sign M7NYK, you can speak to the whole world." As long as Mike's sat there watching her, making sure that she's not doing anything wrong, according to the proposals, that is absolutely fine. Make your own mind up. As I've just said, any licensee may directly supervise use of radio equipment by a non-licensee holder. They have put that bit in. You must physically be with that non-licensed operator all times. The rules regarding club licences are to be relaxed so that the full licence holders may be able to supervise others without licences to operate radio equipment. Previously, you had to be on a recognised training course, i.e. foundation licence, etc. So, where we issued a little piece of brown paper. I'm sure that made all the difference in the world, having a piece of paper in your hand, but there you go. And again, you know, they're asking for comments on any of those proposals. That's what question 2 is about. Question 3, one of interest, it has simulated quite a bit of a conversation. Do you agree on a proposal to use M8 and M9 for intermediate licences going forward? Right? That will, from now on, or when these proposals are put into place, and I believe this will happen in January next year, anybody who passes an intermediate licence or holds an intermediate licence, if you currently hold an intermediate licence, you have offered the opportunity to change it to an M8 or M9. Surrender your 2E1, 2E0. It will not be mandatory yet, and they have put that in yet. I suspect they'll run it for a couple of years and then turn around and say, right, anybody who's left on the pilot is still a 2E0, 2E1, you know, an M call sign. Right. It will be mandatory for all new intermediate licensees from date of inception. If you do decide to keep your intermediate call sign, then you must continue to use relevant regional secondary locator. That may sound a bit odd here, but later on you'll find out why I put that in there. So there's a bit of covers intermediate licences. Do you agree with our proposals to change the policies on RSLs, regional secondary locators? Right, RSLs. I know everybody should know what an RSL is. If you don't, I'm not going to embarrass you asking you to put your hand up, but basically if I go across to Wales, I've got to insert whiskey into my call sign. If I go to Scotland, I've got to put a mic in there, and so on and so forth. If I go to Jersey, Isle of Man, I've got to put a delta in, whatever. Okay, they're actually proposing to completely get rid of it. Absolutely across the board. All right, which personally I think is absolutely bonkers. Right? I really, really do, but that's the proposal, just to get rid of all regional secondary locators and make them your choice, whether you use them or not, which I think is very controversial. They do not contribute to efficient use of radio spectrum, not appropriate to try and enforce them. Yeah, right. Right, and there's no legal requirement for them to enforce them either. Now, use of RSLs become optional. Now, all of us who live in England, regardless of our licence status, with foundation, intermediate or full licence, will then have the option to use E in our call sign. We all want to insert another letter into our call sign, don't we? Yeah, but we've got the option, so don't knock it. Okay. List of RSLs to be used will remain part of the licence, the being listed block. Okay. And the process of issuing special RSLs will be simplified, so you don't need to apply for an NOV. Special RSL, something like Quebec for the Queen's Silver Jubilee, etc. Right, you'll no longer have to go onto the Ofcom website and download that junk bit of paper and then throw it away a month later. There we go about RSLs. Right. They're binning suffixes, supposedly. Now there's stroke M, stroke MM, mobile, marine mobile, alt and portable. Entirely optional, according to the proposals. Okay. They do regard the rules regarding, in particular, marine mobile as confusing. They are, they're garbage, because there are places where you can sit on the Thames estuary and actually be below low water tide mark, which effectively means that you are a marine mobile on a mud bank. Yeah, so it's a bit odd. Suffixes don't form part of the core call sign and not required for management of the spectrum. All references to suffixes will be removed from the licensing document. However, if you still want to use M0TCF mobile, as I do a lot of the time, because I operate mobile, then you're free to do so. It's purely optional, again. And this is what they're doing all the way through the board, guys. They're just taking stuff out and making it optional. Right, another one, controversy, it's kicked certainly on the internet, as Eddie and I were just talking about before I started. Do you agree with our proposals to allow change of call signs? Proposed changes will remove large administrative burden on Ofcom. It's going to make it so you can click onto the website. The whole list of call signs will be available. It's on the database. You better look through it, search through it, find what you want, click it, select it, and off you go. Right. Manual applications call signs cost £20 unless you're over 75. They're getting rid of that full stop. They don't see it as any sort of necessity. So you will not be able to manually apply for a call sign. All unallocated call signs post World War II will be made available on the database. And the reason I said post World War II is because prior to that, they were 2-digit call signs, and they're not going to give them out yet. Right. And again, another controversial one, allow licensees to periodically change their call signs. Believe it or not, the period they're talking about is every 2 years. You know, yeah, exactly. Why? Why would you want to change your call sign? You have to change it again after 2 years. Right. And again, the same thing, call signs for silent key operators will be issued or be available to reissue after being held in suspension for 2 years. Gentlemen, keep in mind that that proposal, I believe, will only take place once they've started running out the call signs again. So in theory, that may not come in for another 30 or 40 years, the 2-year thing. But again, this is where we want clarification. We want that answer. What are they actually on about with that one? Question 7, do you have proposals to limits on how many call signs can be held? I covered this slightly earlier. Specific club licences of interest to Derek, our president at the moment, we can have up to 5 club call signs. And the reason they've decided that number is because in theory, it's possible for Derek to be sitting here banging away on a Morse key, and me and Kerry and Jess be sat at the other end of the room banging out on FT8. And somebody sat in the car park doing some training on the 2-metre band. Which call sign are we going to use? So we get a choice of having up to 5. The only thing is what they've stated that if you're all using a different club call sign or call sign that's related to the clubs, then it must be very clear who we actually are, as in a club call sign. So there we go. Operations, we must operate more and more mode at the same time, because we're allowed to have up to 5 licences. Not mandatory to have them. We can just elect to keep the 2 that we've got. They're not going to worry about it. Right? And as a last statement, the use of the call sign simultaneously in different scenarios, modes of band, etc., must comply with the requirements of the station, will always be clearly identifiable at all times. Again, right, simplified special event call signs. Yes, the regulations regarding special event stations and special event station call signs are complex and overly restrictive. In the way they're overly restrictive, currently they only issue an NOV for a special event call sign for a maximum of 28 days. Once the call sign has been issued, they're insisting it is then rested for 24 months. Those are 2 of the points, covering SES, etc. They're planning to abolish that idea, all those ideas. MOVs create a serious significant amount of volume of casework for Ofcom, and they've also, I like this bit, administrative burden on licensees. What? Send. They never had a problem doing it. There's no reason to make a distinction between a special event station and a special event station. There were some differences in the rules. And they were no garbage anyway. Right. Before, a special event station used to be GB, then a number, and then 3 letters. Right. They're now going to allow us a call sign up to 11. GB, number, and then blah, 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 as long as it finishes with a letter. Which means our application to get, GB 23 King Charles, whatever it was, would have rocked through. Or King Charles, anyway. Special event station will no longer have to be available, accessible to members of the public. That came about as a change during, because of COVID. Before, one of the prerequisites for a special event station was it had to be open to the public and of interest to the public. They've got rid of that. Fabulous. It means now you don't have to throw the doors open every time you want to run something and encourage people to come in. So if we want to operate, say, down at the museum or near the museum, we're not actually having to watch people tramp through us and trip over our cables, etc. I still think that's a good idea, but it's still great to encourage people to come and ask and see what we're doing. Get people into the hobby. So we're going to reduce the time between reissuing call signs from 2 years to 1, and with a 6-month resting period in between in time instead of 2 years. And especially event NOVs valid for a whole year, which would have been really good for us last year when we had our 75th anniversary. We could have just had one NOV, and that would have covered us for the whole of 2022. As it was, we had to just keep rolling it over all the time, which they very kindly let us do. We will permit non-consecutive dates of operation. So again, if we had an anniversary or something and picked weekends throughout the year, they will allow us to specify that sort of thing. And they will permit us to use of mobile and peripatetic operations. Well, we all know what peripatetic means, don't we? No, I had to look it up as well. There are no proposals to make changes to permanent special event call signs and special contest call signs. I'll put one caveat on that at the moment. Watch out. Right. I have put on the bottom here, see the consultation document from overprove the proposals for SES. It's in there. And it is actually quite in depth. And if you're interested in it for whatever reason, have a good read and take it on board. Do you agree with our proposals to increase transmit power? Yes, we all do. We all want more power to compete with the Italians. Yeah, already. Foundation guys, you're going up to 20 watts, 13 dBW. Intermediate crew, you can now turn your radio up to full power. That's what it puts out a barefoot rig. 100 watts. And the rest of us get a kilowatt. If you can pay the electric bill. Okay. They're going to retain the use of PEP, peak power transmission limits, for most standard operations, with separate requirements for some specific operations. If you're experimenting, like Andrew does, Andrew Lenton, our training instructor, he's got some NOVs running 1.5 kilowatts with some experimental stuff. Paul, have you got a NOV on 46?
I've never bothered, but you can apply for one, but they will come out and check you.
Yeah, yeah. Be warned, they will come and check you. And we will be required to calculate ERP or EIRP as licence conditions to comply with EMF regulations. Just keep that in mind, guys. All right, so celebrating on, yeah, we got a kilowatt, but just check your EMF. You know, what it was at 100 watts, be a bit different what it is at a kilowatt. So, you know, if you've got a small back garden, you might not be, you might not be splashing out on that new ACOM as soon as you thought. Right. Remote control operation. And they're covering 3 areas with this. Repeaters, internet gateways and beacons. The Ofcom can find no reason why foundation intermediate licence holders should not be able to use internet technology for remote control operation. Essentially speaking, what they're talking about there, guys, is you sitting down here or in a hotel room in the United States, logging onto your own private system and operating your radio sat and your radio shack at home. Currently, only I and every other full licence holder can do that. Actually, I can't. I don't know how to do it, but I could if I knew how to do it. And I don't own an ICOM, I think it is. You can do it with. But they're proposing that there's no reason why foundation intermediate licensed operators shouldn't be able to do it at all. Yeah, why not? You know, the technology's there, let's make use of it. Right, I'll crunch these three together because basically they're asking the same thing about beacons, gateways and repeaters. Ofcom believes it can incorporate many of the NOVs required to run a repeater, gateway or beacon into the licensing documentation. Inasmuch they can get rid of a lot of the requirements, which will make Bill very happy. In some cases, the requirements are gain a call sign for repeater from the RSJB. This will not change. In a nutshell, gentlemen, if you wish to deploy, for the sake of, shall we say, a community activity, the team and I did the Dickensian evening down at Tavistock, and we really could have done with a local repeater. Provision has been made in there to allow us to deploy a sub 5 watt on-call signed repeater. Anything above 5 watts, the usual rules or the current rules will still apply. You must go through the whole process of application, getting a call sign, etc., etc. But from the point of view of that, that's a brilliant idea. That you must demonstrate or be able to demonstrate that A, that you're not going to cause any interference to anybody else, you've taken reasonable caution about it, and also the equipment actually must be identifiable, or the owner of that equipment must be identifiable, which in their terms says you, at the very least, you must put the number or your license number on there. What they actually want you to do is put your name, your address and your phone number on there as well. Right? And you must have the ability to close it down within 2 hours. I presume that's run up the hill and pick it up and take it away. Beacons to be deployed by all licence holders subject to the relevant rules. The rules around beacons are fairly easy to understand, and if you really want to deploy a beacon for, shall we say, experimental purposes, go and read them. Gateways will no longer at all be subject to NOVs, but this will remain low power. An internet gateway must, according to, for a non-NOV gateway, 500 milliwatts or less. Okay, yeah, here we go. Intermediate and full licenses be able to deploy a repeater of 5 watts or less without an NOV. So let's go and build one into a toolbox and dump it out there on the moor. Hey presto, you've got a repeater running. Alright. Again, the foundation crew, they're going to give the ability to access 2.4 gigs and 5 gigs, and also to build their own equipment for the first time. Why not? I never really saw the reason why they shouldn't be able to. Finance operator is competent. They also believe that the rules, terms and conditions actually already cover the problems involved in the inherent problems of building equipment, because our licences state that we must not knowingly or unknowingly cause interference with somebody else. And they're using that as a catch-all. So if you build your own gear, you've got to make sure, under the terms and conditions of your licence, that you don't create any interference. Right, another good one. I like this. I'm going to hire a balloon. Permission for some limited airborne use. Again, 500 milliwatts EIRP, but at 10,000 metres with a 3-element Yagi, that goes a long way. Interesting. Ofcom have rejected out of hand any sort of discussion application for the use of UAS or drones, etc. They're not having it. They say it's not within the spirit of amateur radio, which is quite interesting. We were allowed to operate any area it's defined as a primary amateur band. When you look at the older the HF spectrum, it's pretty much it. And quite a lot of the other ones as well. So again, an interesting new development. Nearly there, guys. They are proposing to change the licence format and align it with standard terms and conditions. Essentially speaking, all they're going to do is delete some of the stuff off that wonderful licence that we all print off every now and again. All right? They're going to take out things like your previous home address and other bits and pieces. They're simply, all they're doing is actually updating it so it matches all the other licences Ofcom issue for things like ships radio, public radio and all that sort of stuff, taxi licences. All right? We're going to simplify it under the TR 6001, and they're actually going to create, this is the important thing, they're going to create a new T&C booklet, whole new booklet. Those of you who remember the old BR 68, well, they updated it, and now they're updating it again. So we've got a whole new set of regulations to go and read and digest and enjoy. Various miscellaneous changes to simplify or clarify existing terms and legislation. Right. They're doing away with the definition of inland waterways and all the rest of it. If you are in UK territorial waters, regardless of where they are, you are able to operate. Right. With the permission, if you're on a boat, with the permission of the ship's captain. If you're in an aircraft, with the permission of the aircraft's captain. Only full licence holders will be able to operate in international waters. And despite the fact they've done away with the suffixes, you're marine mobile. Okay? And again, that's that. They're modifying the rules regarding encryption. Originally, you couldn't encrypt something unless it was specified by a user surface officer, i.e. the senior controller in an emergency in which you are providing communications. There's only one time that an amateur radio licence operator is allowed to encrypt information. They're changing that slightly, and they're allowing the encryption, for obvious reasons, of signals, control signals between earth stations and satellites in the amateur satellite service. Pretty much makes sense, I think. And they're going to remove references to out-of-date technologies, mailboxes, bulletin boards, that sort of thing that nobody uses anymore. Right. That's it, I've run through it all, guys. Fair whack, and I know I went through it fairly quickly. Ofcom has requested that all responses from stakeholders in the 2023 consumption paper be submitted by the 4th of September. Ofcom will then consider the returned material and produce a response by early December 2023. We propose to implement the changes put forward, including any agreed amendments, in 3 phases. Phase 1 will take place in later 2023, which is pretty much covering things like licence variations, etc., included but not limited to. And these are the changes they're going to make to our licences. Allow third-party unsupervised operations. RSL use will become optional and allowed to be wider, greater use of it. Yeah. Right. Special RSL notifications, call sign suffix provisions, increased transmit power, foundation intimate use for remote control links, incorporate beacon, gateway and repeat NOVs into the licence. What I actually mean by that is that they're actually going to just put a blanket coverage into our licence document and terms and conditions, says you will be able to do this. Effectively meaning that you don't have to do any other administrative work. You're covered by your licence quite closely. Right? They'll permit low power airborne use and an update of the licence in terms and conditions. Phase 2 take place in 2024. They're going to change the licence platform modification or Ofcom as action as required. So once they've got their new internet front end sorted out, they will then implement these changes. Right, they'll introduce new call signs for intermediate guys. They will put a restriction on the number of call signs and the liberalisation of the use of special event station NOVs. And that will take place in early to mid 2024. The final phase, which is the improvements to the online revalidation process, they're maintaining the lifetime licence with a revalidation every 5 years. They're going to actually make that revalidation process mandatory online, and it should be a lot easier and quicker to find. Right. The holding of a single licence and the revocation of lower licence as your licences progress. They will institute that, so as soon as you go from foundation to intermediate, they will automatically, from later 2024, early 25, they will cancel your foundation licence, and so forth up to full licence holder. Right. The choice of a wider call signs via the online portal and the ability to change call signs periodically will be introduced. That should be the 2024-25 financial year, and that's because they need a whole new internet portal to change all this stuff. I'd like you to note the following points, please, gentlemen. This presentation is simply a summary of the main points as I believe them to be in the Ofcom document. The full consultation document is 101 pages long. It contains not only the proposals put forward by Ofcom, but also the reasons behind them, the terms of reference, the legal status, as well as the in-depth reviews of the licensing network framework, technical parameters and licensing terms and conditions. Whilst you can draw many conclusions from this presentation, if you have any specific queries, concerns or issues with any of the proposals, then you should read the section before you complete the questionnaire. Every licensee at whatever level needs to pay heed to this consultation, and the results are implemented. It will require some reassessment to be carried out, particularly those regarding EMF, etc. And the best way to keep fully up to date with the implementation of all these proposals and anything else from Ofcom is subscribe to their email updates. Comes in once a week and just basically says, what, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. All right? And they will be sending out the notifications for the results of this consultation via email. Right? You will have to find it. Many thanks, guys. I hope you've found it useful and informative. On behalf of the Task Committee, I actually recommend that you do take part in this consultation process. And you can do that either in hard copy, you could download it off the Ofcom website, the RSGB. It's absolutely littered all over the place on Facebook, XYZ. I think it's even on our Facebook club page. Or you could do it via email, or you can actually do it online. With that, any questions, please? They're here.
They need a show of hands, please. Can we do a show of hands? How many it's going to be? Crikey. Are you going to be looking at about 30, aren't you?
You'll be looking at something like that, yeah.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope you found that useful, guys. The document's here. I have read it a few times, etc. Yes, Mike.
Who's going to monitor all this, and what are the penalties?
Yeah. Ofcom. It's Kerry.
So I don't need a new set of pyjamas to go into Dartmoor, for instance.
No.
A couple of things about removing all references to suffixes from the licence.
Yeah.
So then they say you can carry on using them. But if you've got no idea what those suffixes are, does that mean it's a free?
Some of it, as you've just discovered and I discovered, I had to read stuff like that at least 2 or 3 times. It's quite contradictory.
Yeah.
I think basically what they're saying is, you know, a lot of this stuff has just been taken in hand by the amateur radio fraternity. You know, and it's just been carried on for year after year, decade after decade. And I think that's basically what they're expecting. But what they're actually doing is they're just clarifying it and saying it's not part of the licensing terms and conditions, but you can still use it if you wish. Yeah. You know, some of the proposals I think are downright bonkers. You know, reissuing call signs after 2 years. Not a great one. Andrew? Yeah.
As a repeated speaker myself now, I know as well as Bill the problems you have with getting a license. But what concerns me greatly, and I know I'm not the only one where I come from, well, where you come from,
Gents,
is are they going to enforce the remote shutdown using GSM switches? 'Cause they usually
Only
use
on-
RF, but
only on,
there's not enough band for 2 metres.
Yeah. it's just across the board, not just 2 metres. This is, you can set up a quite interesting comment. There is no requirement for remote shutdown on any of the on a repeater with sub 5 watts.
The filters on 2 are horrendous. I mean, imagine leaving those.
Crossband repeater, crossband, 2 and 70.
Well, yeah, no, that's a different matter.
Yeah.
If you're doing crossband, that's different.
Well, I'm not even funny, I don't know anybody who's keen enough to build a 5 watt repeater, sub 5 watt repeater on 2 metres. That's some expensive filters. Dave?
In Gibraltar, the repeater is 2 telephones linked together.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very simple to do. Very, very easy to do.
It strikes me the removal of the RSL is going to cause immense problems to award programmes, logging programmes. I mean, it's going to be a nightmare.
I think basically by making it optional, whether you use it or not, is their way of.
If you've got a guy in Scotland,
Yeah.
right, who's not using the RSL, and you log in, and then you upload your log to the world, nobody is going to know where he was.
Yeah, exactly. So I think at the end of the day, anybody with half a brain and 14 pieces of lead shot keeping their ears apart is going to continue using RSL. And if you don't, then you risk, essentially speaking, taking yourself out of the system.
When they go by a grid square,
Well, they don't go by the grid square, do they?
I mean, the ARRL wouldn't accept it.
No.
They would say
It's quite right. I mean, yeah, most of the logbooks
it's
wouldn't.
invalid because
Yeah.
there's no. If you say you're in Wales, but you're using an English call sign.
Yeah.
They say
You
no.
normally have to input the grid square where you're working from, don't you? So.
Exactly. They can cause all sorts of confusion. And I doubt very much the guys that are running all the worldwide login system, etc., the contesting, are going to update all their software just to take this into account.
No, because some grid squares, like for example IL85, has got England and Scotland in it.
Yeah. Any more, guys? Thank you very much.
Right, I think on behalf of the club, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Lynn for putting that together. That's been really, really informative. And, hopefully people have enjoyed it and learned something from it. I know I have. And to all the people out there on the YouTube channel, I hope you found it interesting as well.
Cheers, guys.